Either you're already working with the board member from hell, or you know exactly who we're talking about, and you would like to try to avoid having to work with them in a board scenario in the future. Let's talk about it.
We are Ted and Lisa Snyder, and we are nonprofit consultants because we believe that a better world needs healthier nonprofits. And today we are talking about the board member from hell, which is a super important topic because a lot of times it's easy as nonprofit leaders to focus on your volunteers, your key leaders, and kind of forget about the board and how they impact your entire organization. So whether you have a current board member from hell that you are dealing with, we're going to give you some tips and tricks and some just steps forward on how to deal with that. Or maybe you're actively looking for a board member and you're concerned that you're going to end up with one of these stories. We want to give you some great pointers so that your organization can move forward in a healthy way, because a board member has so much impact on the culture and health of your organization. And so these roles are very important.
Okay, so like when I think about the board member from hell, I'm thinking about doesn't show up to board meetings. When they do, their arms are crossed. They're never like on board, even though they're on the board.
Every conversation you have with them, you feel like you're fighting. They want to take the organization in a different direction, or they want to do the same direction, but they want to have completely different tactics. No matter what idea you have, they have the, I just don't think it's going to work attitude.
And maybe they're, and hopefully they're like in the minority, right? Like you don't have a full board of this person, right? But they're there, but you just wish they would resign. You're like, please just leave.
Yeah.
But you don't necessarily, you can't just like evict them. You know, there are bylaws and things that make sure that the board can be an accountability place to help hold you as the leader accountable.
Or the other one, the board member who says they agree with you to your face, and then behind the scenes, they're trying to rally people against you.
Oh, I've heard stories about this.
There are so many stories about this.
And then like turns the entire organization on its head. Like there's literally one that I'm thinking of right now that we know about that turns the entire organization on its head, ousts the leaders who are in charge of it, and then tanks the whole thing, and it has to shut its doors within a couple of years.
Yeah, those are board members from hell. So let's talk about it. If we have a nonprofit who currently has one of these board members, what is the first couple pieces of advice that you would have on dealing with this?
Well, the first thing is make sure you know how your bylaws work and see what it would take, if it's even possible, to move this board member out of that position. Chances are, if they're really that negative about everything, they probably are begrudgingly doing it. Like on some level, they're just done. They're kind of like, I don't even care about this, but they just feel some sort of like guilt that they have to stay on or something. So make sure you know your bylaws so that way you can move forward if ousting them is even an option.
Yeah. You don't want to go to war with someone and start trying to get them out if the bylaws don't have any space for it, or you don't know what that path forward would be. It's not a good idea to say, I'm going to fight this battle right now, and then later realize that this battle is something that just cannot be won. Now, you're a lot more gracious toward this board member. You're assuming they don't want to be a part of it.
Well, I'm just saying that's a possibility.
Assumption is that they like to have control, but don't have any other leadership in any other aspect of their lives. So this is their
their petty way of getting.
I am holding on. With this, along with knowing your bylaws for getting them out, you also need to know what other bylaws are in place that are going to impact other areas of your organization. So as you're making decisions, if you don't need 100% board approval, but you simply need majority board approval for certain things, then you can also start to move forward with your organization, understanding that you don't necessarily need them on board. So while you are trying to figure out how you can maybe move them out and starting that process or that conversation with the other board members, you can also be looking at how, in the meantime, can we continue moving our organization forward so that whenever this person's term is done, because it will be done, there aren't really board member positions that last for infinity.
Lifetime appointments.
So make sure that you are consciously building up your organization now so that by the time that person does step out, whether it be in 2 weeks or in a year, you have a pool of people that you can draw from who are going to be healthy board members who are going to be able to help your organization.
Right. You always want to be thinking, who are my future board members at any given point? Because you don't know when somebody is going to need to resign or move away, or for whatever reason they need to be done. A lot of times the board member from hell is born out of desperation. It's like, oh, shoot, we need 5 board members. So, just grab anybody that we possibly can. And then you end up in a really dangerous place a lot of times.
Yep. Now, depending on how your board structure is set up, sometimes the way that nonprofits have it structured is you have the leader and the board actually manages a lot of the volunteers or the different activities. Maybe the board member who is over the financial stuff is also helping out with the stuff in the office. This could be a great time to start separating those roles just a little bit by saying, hey, we're going to have the board take on more of a mentorship role, accountability, fiduciary responsibility, that kind of role. And I, as the leader, am going to start managing more of the volunteers and bringing that just a little bit more under my umbrella. That can be really healthy long term, and it might be a good solution for this, where this board member who's giving you a hard time doesn't have as much direct access to the people within your organization that you are trying to get to be on your team moving forward.
Right. And when you make that adjustment too, it also allows for you to really find better fits for the board as well, because they don't need to be the kind of people who have a lot of time to volunteer or a lot of necessarily leadership expertise. Mm-hmm. So they can really then be specialized in their board position instead of have to be kind of like a jack of all trades kind of person. And so you want to be thinking, how can I move sort of the operation of the nonprofit under my purview as the leader, and move the decision making and the like you were saying, all the accountability and advice and mentorship and just kind of helping to steer the ship in a positive way. That should be more what the board's responsibility is, not necessarily having to deal with a lot of the details down in the muck.
Yep. Now, the last thing that I'll say about this, and you might have a couple more things, is as you're having the conversations with this board member, make sure that you know what your end goal is. If it is to help get them out before their term is officially over, first, know it's possible within your bylaws and know what your steps are and what you're trying to accomplish. If it's not possible within your bylaws, know what your goal with the conversation is. It doesn't help your organization to fight with someone who you know you're going to be fighting with for the next 12 months. But if you can get this person on your page enough to even be able to say, listen, we have different opinions on how this should be run. At the end of the day, we both want to see the cause have success. Can we find a way to meet in the middle and start adjusting your stuff a little bit so that they can adjust their stuff a little bit? Because long term, you don't want this person to go to war with you as the leader. The board has full capacity to evict a nonprofit leader if it were to get to that point. The board can usually also have a way to oust one of its own members. But in either case, it's not helpful for the nonprofit and for the volunteers within the nonprofit to see that much divisiveness within leadership. And so as a leader, if you can talk to this board member or the board as a whole and just say, hey, what are our goals over the next few months? What would we like to see accomplished? And then if that person does push back a little bit or has an unkind attitude toward you, you can kind of just let it roll off your back, knowing that the end is in sight and you have a plan. One of the hardest things about dealing with these board members is when you feel like they are going to be a board member forever. So start figuring out what you can have happen now, what your bylaws allow for. Make sure that other people are kind of on the same page with you and get a feel for what the other board members are thinking. Because if it's bothering you, it's probably bothering them. And if it's bothering you and not bothering them at all, that is a different red flag. So start with that conversation, figure out what you can do within the bylaws for your organization.
Another piece of advice is if you got a board member like this, or honestly, even like a team member like this, maybe this isn't even on your board, but I'm going to keep it board specific for the sake of the video. Yeah. Talk to the people who are ready to take the hill with you. Don't be aiming all of your conversation, communication at this one person.
Yeah.
You know, if you got one person that's against you and 3 people that are for you and a couple people that are like swing votes, talk to the people who are for you. Like in the board meetings, speak the language that gets them on fire, gets them excited, gets them moving. If the person's really truly negative, sometimes it doesn't matter what you say or do. They're just always going to fight you on it. Yeah. But if you can get people who are like ready to go, if you can get them excited and inspired, a lot of times those swing votes will just be like, yeah, I'm all for it. And that person who's the board member from hell is going to eventually just sort of sort themselves out too and just be like, you know what? I don't know if this is a good fit for me because
seems like everyone else is against
me. Exactly. And this is all about being smart about it, because you could try to poison the board member, right? That's a bad idea. You don't want to oust them.
Well, way to go to the extreme. We're not going to try and oust them right away, but
you don't want to oust them in a way that is unhealthy, right? And
or unethical.
Or unethical. And that was an extreme example, obviously. But you got to do it in a way that's going to work and set your organization up for health long term. And if you kind of like scooch a board member off in a way that is icky, that is going to spread. Yeah, people will remember that. People are going to, the word about that is probably going to spread, even though you don't necessarily want that to happen. And so do it well, do it right, take the steps that you need to take, and be strategic about it.
Yep. And having those conversations with the people who are for you is hugely important. Too often we want to argue with the people who are against us. In organizations, we want everyone to be on board with our vision and what we're trying to accomplish. But it's so much more valuable to look at a room and say, these three people they're in this with me. They're not the board member from hell, but they're the people who are in it come hell or high water. Mm-hmm. And so make sure that you're having those conversations, that you're speaking with them, that you're casting vision to them, that you're not only talking about, well, we don't do it this way in our organization, but this is what we are accomplishing. This is what we are doing. This is where we are going. And the people who are meant to be with you long term are going to resonate with that. If the only conversations you're ever having are vision casting against the person who's against you, you will lose the vast majority of people within your organization because they're not going to resonate with that personal offense. But if you speak your vision and you speak your mission and you speak where you're going, you're going to get a lot more people on board with that.
One other final piece of advice on dealing with the board member from hell is solve their problem. If they're constantly having the same problem, we don't have enough funds, we don't have enough volunteers, we don't have enough time, we don't have enough planning, then you as the leader, it's your responsibility to figure out how to solve that problem. Go out and do the fundraising, get the volunteers, figure out how to manage the time well. When you bring solutions to that board meeting and that person still has the same problem, well, we don't have enough money, but you just raised $10,000, that complaint suddenly doesn't carry as much weight. And it definitely doesn't carry as much weight with the other board members. Right. They're like, this person just always thinks we don't have any money.
Their level of influence increases and your level of trust their level of influence within the board decreases and your level of trust increases with the other board, and they're more likely to back you in upcoming decisions.
Absolutely.
Now, talking about avoiding the board member from hell, right? Yep. One of the best ways that you can avoid the board member from hell is to start planning now by growing up your volunteer base. Your volunteers are likely going to become your best volunteer leaders, your best staff members, and then even your best board members. Because as they get on board and as they want to learn more about what you're doing, you're going to have time to get to know them and see who is a good fit for your organization's culture, for where your organization is going, and for what your organization needs. Board members don't necessarily have to be your top volunteer leaders. They need to be the people who know what to be looking for behind the scenes, who can advise so that your leaders can succeed and thrive. And so as you build out that volunteer base, you're going to have a lot more room in order to meet a variety of people who care about what you're doing, and then be able to pull someone who you've already worked with, so you know that you're not going to hate that relationship going forward.
Yeah, and they already have the culture, and they already carry the heart of the organization. In a lot of ways, you're looking for people that are already on your volunteer base that care about the organization as much, if not more, than you do. And so that is a huge way to avoid a bad board member in the future, is just think about, how can I increase volunteer opportunities? And specifically, how can I increase some volunteer opportunities that help me to see what people's skills and giftings are that could potentially put them in the spot for a board position in the future.
Yes. So if you're interested in learning more about that, we have a tips video on how to get more volunteers. So that'll be showing up here on your screen. In the meantime, see you in the next video.